Officer Nathan Briggs had been with the Atlanta Police Department for 6 years when he walked into a situation that would destroy his career and cost the city $3.6 million. He was 31 years old, experienced enough to know procedure, but apparently convinced that his instincts trumped evidence, protocol, and basic human dignity. One Saturday afternoon at a pet supply store in Buckhead, he received a call about a suspicious black man browsing the aisles. The suspicious man was Judge Marcus Whitfield, a 23-year veteran of the Georgia judiciary who'd spent his morning at a charity golf tournament and stopped to pick up food for his golden retriever. What Briggs did next, demanding identification without reasonable suspicion, dismissing judicial credentials as fake, and detaining a sitting judge in front of weekend shoppers, would become proof of how unchecked bias destroys careers and drains public coffers. Judge Whitfield had spent over 2 decades sending people to prison. He knew exactly what wrongful detention looked like, and he documented everything. A black man, in his early 60 seconds, Judge Marcus Whitfield was standing in aisle 7 of a pet supply store, comparing 2 brands of senior dog food for his one-year-old golden retriever. His golf polo was still tucked into his khakis from the morning's charity tournament. No crime, no disturbance, no suspicious behavior, just a judge buying dog food on a Saturday afternoon. But Officer Briggs saw him through a filter so distorted by assumptions about who belongs in affluent shopping districts that he couldn't process a black man as a legitimate customer. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Possum Pet Supply sits on Peachtree Road in the heart of Buckhead, one of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods. It's the kind of store that caters to people who treat their pets like family members, offering organic food, designer accessories, and grooming services that cost more than some people's haircuts. The building itself is a converted mid-century commercial space with high ceilings, polished concrete floors, and natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Displays are arranged like a high-end boutique, not a typical pet store. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Saturday in late September. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, where luxury SUVs and sedans filled nearly every space. Inside, the store hummed with the quiet activity of weekend shoppers. Couples debating between grain-free options, families letting their children pick out toys for the family dog, regulars chatting with staff who knew their pets by name. The clientele was predominantly white and affluent, the kind of people who lived in the surrounding neighborhoods where homes averaged $1.2 million. Buckhead attracted professionals, executives, and old money families who expected a certain level of service and a certain type of customer. The store employed a mix of college students and retirees who genuinely loved animals, people who knew the difference between a nervous first-time pet owner and someone causing trouble. The air conditioning kept the space cool despite the lingering Georgia heat outside. A golden retriever being groomed in the back occasionally barked, the only disruption to an otherwise peaceful afternoon. The kind of Saturday where nothing dramatic typically happens. Judge Marcus Whitfield had been on the Fulton County Superior Court bench for 14 years. 14 years of presiding over criminal trials, civil disputes, and everything in between. He'd handled more than 3,000 cases. He'd been reversed on appeal exactly 7 times in 14 years, a record that made him one of the most respected jurists in the state. His colleagues called him fair. Defense attorneys called him tough, but just. Prosecutors called him the judge who actually read the briefs. Before his appointment to Superior Court, Whitfield spent 9 years as an assistant district attorney in DeKalb County, prosecuting violent crimes and building a reputation for meticulous preparation. He tried 47 jury cases and lost only 3. He supervised junior prosecutors, trained new hires, and eventually ran the Major Crimes Unit. When he left to accept his judicial appointment, the district attorney called it a loss for the office but a gain for justice. Whitfield had graduated from Morehouse College in 1983, then earned his law degree from the University of Georgia School of Law, where he'd been editor of the Georgia Law Review. He'd clerked for Judge Robert Benham on the Georgia Court of Appeals, one of the first black judges on that court, before joining the district attorney's office. He'd been admitted to the State Bar of Georgia for 37 years, served on the Judicial Council of Georgia, and taught trial advocacy as an adjunct professor at Emory Law School. In 2019, the State Bar had awarded him the Thomas O. Marshall Professionalism Award, recognizing his commitment to ethical practice and mentorship of young lawyers. At 62 years old, Judge Marcus Whitfield was exactly where he'd worked to be: respected, influential, and making a difference in a system he'd dedicated his life to improving. He'd been married to his wife, Patricia, a retired pediatrician, for 34 years. They had 2 adult children, a daughter who practiced corporate law in Chicago, and a son who taught high school history in Savannah. Every Sunday, Whitfield and Patricia attended services at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the same church where Martin Luther King Jr. once preached. He was a man of routine and discipline. Morning runs at 5:30 a.m. Coffee black. No sugar. Newspaper before breakfast. He'd spent his entire adult life building credibility, earning trust, and proving himself in spaces where black men weren't always welcome. That Saturday, Whitfield had played in the annual Lawyers Foundation charity golf tournament at the Atlanta Athletic Club. He'd finished 9 holes, shared lunch with colleagues, and headed home around 2:15 p.m. On the drive back to his home in the Cascade Heights neighborhood, he'd remembered that Duke, his one-year-old golden retriever, was almost out of the special senior formula food the vet had recommended. He'd pulled into the Possum Pet Supply parking lot at 2:38 p.m. He was still wearing his golf attire, a light blue polo shirt, khaki pants, and comfortable walking shoes. His judicial ID was in his wallet, along with his driver's license and several credit cards. He looked like what he was: a man in his 60 seconds who'd just finished playing golf and needed to run an errand. He'd entered the store, nodded at the young woman behind the counter, and walked directly to aisle 7, where the dog food was displayed. He'd been comparing 2 brands, reading the nutritional labels, trying to decide if Duke would tolerate the new lamb formula or if he should stick with the chicken. He'd done nothing to attract attention. He'd spoken to no one except to return a greeting. He'd touched nothing except the 2 bags of dog food he was examining. But to one person in that store, Judge Marcus Whitfield's presence was a problem. And that person had already picked up the phone. Nathan Briggs was 31 years old. He'd been a patrol officer with the Atlanta Police Department for 6 years, assigned to Zone 2, which covered Buckhead and surrounding areas. He was conscientious, eager to prove himself, and deeply convinced that his ability to read people was exceptional. His supervisors described him as proactive and highly motivated, coded language that often meant aggressive. Briggs had grown up in a small town in South Georgia, joined the Army at 18, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and returned home with a conviction that discipline and order were the foundations of civilization. He joined APD at 25, believing police work was an extension of military service: identify threats, neutralize them, maintain control. In 6 years, Briggs had compiled a record that should have raised red flags at every level of supervision. 9 complaints. 9. 7 of them involved allegations of racial profiling or excessive force against black residents. 4 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands, mandatory retraining, and 1 3-day suspension without pay. The other 5 had been closed with findings of insufficient evidence or exonerated despite troubling patterns. Briggs had a pattern. He responded to calls in affluent areas with a presumption that black people didn't belong there. A black real estate agent showing a home in Buckhead was detained for 40 minutes while Briggs verified she actually worked for the agency. He'd called her broker, her office, and run her license plates before releasing her with no apology. A black teenager walking home from a friend's house in Peachtree Hills was stopped and questioned about where he lived, where he was going, and why he was in the neighborhood. The boy's father, a surgeon at Piedmont Hospital, filed a formal complaint. A black woman jogging through Chastain Park at 6 a.m. was followed by Briggs in his patrol car for nearly half a mile before he pulled alongside her and asked if she needed assistance, which she interpreted as intimidation. The pattern was clear. The documentation was extensive, but somehow Briggs remained on patrol. His supervisors noted in evaluations that he should work on community relations and building trust with diverse populations. Those notes never translated into meaningful consequences. Briggs had never faced serious discipline because the department treated each complaint as an isolated incident rather than a pattern of discriminatory behavior. That Saturday at 2:41 p.m., Briggs was parked in a shopping center lot running radar when his radio crackled. A call had come in from Possum Pet Supply, a suspicious black male, possibly casing the store, wearing a blue shirt and khaki pants. The caller, a customer named Linda Harrington, told the dispatcher she'd seen him walking slowly through the aisles, looking around like he was planning something. Briggs responded immediately. In his mind, the narrative was already forming. Buckhead location, upscale store, suspicious person who didn't fit. He didn't consider that browsing slowly is how people shop for pet supplies. He didn't think about the fact that looking around is normal behavior in a store. He didn't question why a black man in golf attire would be casing a pet supply store at 2:30 on a Saturday afternoon. He just responded. Briggs arrived at 2:45 p.m. He parked directly in front of the store, walked inside with purpose, and scanned the space for anyone matching the description. His eyes moved past the white customers without pause. They landed on Judge Whitfield standing in aisle 7, studying a bag of dog food. A black man, blue shirt, khakis, standing alone. In Briggs's mind, that had to be the problem. He walked directly toward aisle 7. Do you think officers should face mandatory suspension after 5 complaints involving racial profiling? Drop your answer below. Judge Whitfield was reading the ingredient list on a bag of premium senior dog food when he became aware of someone standing at the end of the aisle. He looked up and saw a uniformed police officer, hand resting on his belt, staring at him with an expression that mixed suspicion with authority. "Sir, I need to see some identification." Whitfield blinked. In 37 years as a lawyer and judge, in 62 years of being a black man in America, he knew exactly what this was. But he'd learned long ago that responding with immediate anger rarely helped. "Excuse me?" Briggs took 2 steps closer. His posture shifted into what he probably thought was commanding. "You heard me. ID. Now." Whitfield set the bag of dog food back on the shelf. He turned to face the officer fully, keeping his hands visible, his voice measured. "I'm shopping for dog food. Is there a problem? We received a call about someone matching your description acting suspiciously. I need to see ID. Someone matching my description." Whitfield knew what that meant. It meant black. It meant tall. It meant male. It meant everything except actually suspicious. Acting suspiciously? "I've been in this store for 10 minutes looking at pet supplies. That's what people do in stores." Briggs's jaw tightened. That's exactly what someone casing the place would say. ID. Last time I'm asking. Whitfield reached slowly into his back pocket and pulled out his wallet. He opened it and withdrew his judicial identification card, the laminated credential that identified him as a judge of the Fulton County Superior Court, complete with his photograph, signature, and official seal. "I'm Judge Marcus Whitfield. I sit on the Fulton County Superior Court. Here's my judicial ID." He held it out, the card clearly visible. Briggs glanced at it. His expression didn't change. In fact, it hardened. "Sure you are. And I'm the Pope." Whitfield felt something shift in his chest. He'd spent his entire career on the other side of wrongful detention claims. He'd read hundreds of cases where officers dismissed legitimate identification. He'd seen the pattern in depositions, body camera footage, and trial testimony. Now he was living it. "Officer, this is an official judicial credential issued by the state of Georgia. You can verify it with 1 phone call." Briggs didn't reach for his radio. He didn't take the ID for closer examination. He stepped closer instead. "Hands where I can see them. My hands are visible. I'm showing you my credentials. What more do you need? I need you to stop resisting." "I'm not resisting anything. I'm standing in a pet store holding my judicial ID. This is where bias becomes impenetrable." Officer Briggs had arrived at the store expecting to find a suspicious black man. When he saw a black man, his expectation was confirmed. Nothing after that moment could change the narrative his mind had already constructed. Not a judicial ID. not calm professionalism, not the complete absence of any criminal behavior. In Briggs's world, black men in affluent spaces were problems to be solved, not customers to be respected. A legitimate judge? Impossible. A fake ID? Obviously. A man shopping for dog food? Clearly a cover story. The credential in Whitfield's hand was invisible to Briggs because his bias had already decided what he was seeing. The store had gone quiet. Customers who'd been browsing stopped moving. A mother pulled her young daughter closer. A man at the register turned to watch. The cashier, a young woman named Destiny who'd worked at the store for 2 years, reached for her phone. "I'm reaching for my judicial credentials." Whitfield's voice was deliberately loud, projected for the benefit of everyone within earshot. "I don't care if you're the Chief Justice. You're not leaving until I verify who you are. Then verify. Call the Fulton County Courthouse. Call the State Bar. Call anyone you want. I'll wait." Briggs didn't make any calls. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "For what?" "What crime have I committed?" "Failure to comply with a lawful order." "What lawful order?" "You've asked for ID. I've provided it. You haven't verified it. You haven't explained what suspicious behavior I supposedly engaged in. You haven't cited any law I've broken." A customer near the front of the store called out, "He's been here the whole time. He hasn't done anything wrong." Another voice joined. "This is ridiculous. He's shopping." Briggs ignored them. Should officers be required to verify judicial credentials before detaining judges in non-emergency situations? Let me know what you think. Judge Whitfield knew he had a choice. He could assert his rights and risk escalation. He could resist and give Briggs exactly what he seemed to want, justification for force. Or he could comply, document everything, and ensure this officer faced accountability in a system Whitfield knew intimately. He chose compliance. "I'm complying under protest. My name is Judge Marcus Whitfield. I sit on the Fulton County Superior Court. This officer is detaining me for shopping while black. Everyone here is witnessing this. Please record." Several phones came up. Destiny behind the counter had already been recording for 30 seconds. A man near the window adjusted his angle. A woman near the dog toys had her camera pointed directly at the confrontation. Briggs spun Whitfield around and pulled his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked shut. "You're being detained pending verification." "Then verify. You have my judicial ID. You have my driver's license in my wallet. My car is in the parking lot with registration that matches my name. Verify anything." Briggs said nothing. He marched Whitfield toward the front of the store, past stunned customers, past the cashier who was still recording, past the displays of dog beds and cat toys that Judge Whitfield had walked by minutes earlier as a free man. Outside, Briggs guided him toward the patrol car. "I want your badge number. I want your name. I want your supervisor notified immediately." Briggs opened the back door. "You'll get everything at the precinct." "I'm not going to the precinct. You're going to verify my credentials right now, or you're going to face charges yourself. False arrest. Violation of civil rights." For the first time, something flickered across Briggs's face. Uncertainty. "Get in the car." Before Whitfield could be placed in the patrol car, another vehicle pulled into the lot. Sergeant Teresa Washington, a 19-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department and Briggs's direct supervisor, had been in the area when she heard the radio traffic. Something about the call had bothered her. Suspicious person at an upscale pet store, blue shirt and khakis. No actual crime reported. She decided to swing by. Washington stepped out of her vehicle and immediately assessed the scene. Briggs standing next to his patrol car, a black man in handcuffs, customers gathered outside the store, phones pointed at the confrontation. Her stomach dropped. "Briggs. What's going on here?" Briggs straightened. Responded to a call about a suspicious person. Sergeant. This individual matched the description and refused to comply. Washington walked closer. She looked at Judge Whitfield, at his golf attire, at his calm expression despite the handcuffs, at the judicial ID card still visible in Briggs's hand. "Is that a judicial ID?" "He claims he's a judge. I haven't verified it yet." Washington took the ID and examined it carefully. The seal was legitimate. The format matched every judicial credential she'd seen in 19 years. The photograph was clearly the man standing in front of her. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew from memory, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, which provided courthouse security. "This is Sergeant Teresa Washington, Atlanta PD. I need verification on a judicial credential. Judge Marcus Whitfield." The response came within 90 seconds. "Yes, ma'am. Judge Whitfield is active on the Superior Court bench. Been there 14 years. What's this about?" Washington closed her eyes briefly. "Administrative matter." She hung up and turned to Briggs with an expression that could have frozen fire. "Take those cuffs off." "Sergeant," I said, "take them off." Briggs fumbled with his keys, unlocked the handcuffs. Whitfield rubbed his wrists, red marks already forming where the metal had pressed too tight. Washington stepped directly in front of Briggs, her voice dropping to something cold and final. "You just handcuffed a sitting Superior Court judge outside a pet store because he was shopping for dog food while black. I was responding to a call. You didn't verify his credentials. You didn't call for backup. You didn't investigate the nature of the complaint. You saw a black man and assumed he was a criminal." The caller said. The caller was wrong. "And you didn't bother to find that out before you put a judge in handcuffs." She held out her hand. "Badge and weapon. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Sergeant." "Badge. Weapon." Briggs's hands shook as he unclipped his badge, removed his service weapon, and handed them over. His face had gone pale, the reality of what he'd done finally breaking through. Washington turned to Judge Whitfield. Her expression shifted from fury to something approaching genuine remorse. "Judge Whitfield, on behalf of the Atlanta Police Department, I am deeply sorry. This should never have happened. It's inexcusable, and I take full responsibility for the actions of my officer." Whitfield nodded slowly. His voice was measured, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. "Sergeant, I appreciate your intervention, but this isn't about one officer having a bad day. I saw his personnel file in the way he approached me. I saw the pattern in his assumptions. This is systemic, and I intend to address it as such." Washington didn't argue. "I understand, Your Honor. Whatever you need from me, I'll provide it. I'll need body camera footage, incident reports, the 911 call recording, and Officer Briggs's complete complaint history. My attorney will be in touch Monday morning. Should officers face automatic termination after wrongful detention of judges or prosecutors?" Within 3 hours, the videos had exploded across social media. Multiple angles from different witnesses showed everything. Judge Whitfield calmly presenting his credentials, Officer Briggs dismissing them, the handcuffs being applied, the march to the patrol car. The footage was damning in its simplicity. A man shopping for dog food. A cop who couldn't imagine he belonged. Judge detained at pet store. He's a 23-year judicial veteran. Atlanta officer handcuffs. Superior Court judge for shopping while black. "Sure you are, cop dismisses judicial ID, arrests judge anyway." The outrage was immediate and intense. The Georgia State Bar issued a statement expressing concern. The NAACP Atlanta chapter demanded an investigation. Civil rights organizations called for accountability. The Fulton County Judiciary released a brief statement. "Judge Whitfield is a respected member of this court. We are disturbed by reports of his detention and await the results of the investigation." Nathan Briggs's life imploded within 72 hours. Administrative leave became the subject of an internal affairs investigation. His name was released to the media. His social media profiles were discovered and scrutinized. The Atlanta Police Department issued a statement distancing themselves from his actions. Officer Briggs has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Briggs released no public statement. The woman who made the 911 call, Linda Harrington, was identified through dispatch records. She gave a brief statement to a local news station. "I thought he was acting suspicious. I didn't know he was a judge." She declined further comment, but her name became permanently associated with the incident. Judge Whitfield retained counsel within 48 hours. The lawsuit, filed 19 days after the incident, named Officer Nathan Briggs individually. Sergeant Teresa Washington for supervisory failure, the City of Atlanta, and the Atlanta Police Department. The claims were comprehensive: unlawful detention without probable cause, false imprisonment, violation of civil rights under Section 1983, racial profiling and discrimination, excessive use of force, including unreasonably tight handcuffs, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and failure to train and supervise officers with documented patterns of discriminatory behavior. The complaint included Briggs's complete personnel file: 9 complaints over 6 years, 7 involving allegations of racial profiling, 4 sustained with discipline, and a pattern of targeting Black individuals in affluent areas that supervisors had noted but never meaningfully addressed. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached the same conclusion: indefensible. The videos were everywhere. The witness statements were consistent. The judicial credentials were legitimate. The officer's pattern was documented. And the plaintiff wasn't just any victim. He was a sitting Superior Court judge with 23 years of experience in the legal system, connections throughout Georgia's judiciary, and the resources to pursue litigation as long as necessary. The city settled 11 months after the incident. $3.6 million paid to Judge Marcus Whitfield. The settlement included no admission of wrongdoing, which is standard, but the dollar amount spoke for itself. Additional terms required the department to implement new policies on credential verification and establish an early warning system for officers with multiple bias-related complaints. Nathan Briggs was terminated 14 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was comprehensive. Officer Briggs detained a sitting Superior Court judge without probable cause, dismissed legitimate judicial credentials, and demonstrated a pattern of racial profiling consistent with 9 prior complaints filed during his tenure. Despite multiple training interventions and disciplinary actions, Officer Briggs continued to target Black individuals in predominantly white spaces based on assumptions rather than evidence. His conduct violated department policy, state law, and the civil rights of a citizen he was sworn to protect. Employment is terminated effective immediately. Briggs's name was entered into the Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council database as terminated for cause. His law enforcement career was over at 31 years old. The police union reviewed the case, examined the evidence, and declined to pursue an appeal. Even they couldn't defend this one. Judge Whitfield testified before the Atlanta City Council 6 months after the settlement was finalized. The chamber was full. Media cameras lined the back wall. His testimony was methodical, precise, exactly what you'd expect from a jurist who'd spent decades evaluating evidence and presenting arguments. I've been a lawyer and judge in this state for 37 years. I've presided over thousands of cases. I've sent people to prison. I've ruled on civil rights claims. I've read more police reports than I can count. He paused, letting the weight of his credentials settle over the room. On September 28th, I stopped at a pet store in Buckhead to buy dog food for my golden retriever. Within 10 minutes, I was in handcuffs. Another pause. I wasn't committing a crime. I wasn't acting suspiciously. I wasn't trespassing or disturbing anyone. I was reading the nutritional label on a bag of senior dog food. And an officer looked at me and saw a criminal. His voice remained steady, but the indictment in his words was unmistakable. I showed him my judicial credentials. He called them fake. I offered to let him verify them with a phone call. He refused. I told him my name, my position, my court. He said, and I quote, "I don't care if you're the Chief Justice." He let that sink in. 9 complaints in 6 years. 7 involving racial profiling. 4 sustained. And Officer Briggs was still on patrol, still responding to calls, still assuming that Black people in nice neighborhoods must be criminals. His voice strengthened. $3.6 million is significant. It's accountability. But it doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't erase the humiliation of being handcuffed in front of strangers for buying dog food. It doesn't restore the dignity that officer stripped from me in that parking lot. He looked directly at the council members. I'm a judge with connections, resources, and the ability to fight back. The Black teenager walking home from school, The black woman jogging in the park? The chamber was silent. If this can happen to me, with all my credentials and authority, what happens to everyone else? Should sustained complaints of racial profiling trigger automatic review for termination rather than just retraining? Drop your answer. This wasn't just about one officer making one mistake on one Saturday afternoon. This was about a department that allowed Nathan Briggs to accumulate 9 complaints over 6 years while remaining on patrol. This was about a system that treated each incident as isolated, never connecting the pattern that was obvious to anyone willing to look. Briggs's record told the story his supervisors ignored. 9 complaints in 6 years, 7 involving racial profiling, 4 sustained with discipline, retraining after retraining that never changed behavior, supervisory notes about improving community relations that never translated into consequences, a black real estate agent detained for doing her job, a black teenager questioned for walking home, a black woman followed while jogging in a public park. Each complaint filed, documented, and filed away. The pattern was unmistakable, but the Atlanta Police Department treated every incident in isolation, never acknowledging that the same officer kept having the same problem with the same demographic in the same types of spaces. Nathan Briggs's career is over. That's consequence. The city paid $3.6 million. That's accountability. New policies were implemented. That's progress. But money and terminations don't undo the trauma of being handcuffed for existing. They don't restore the dignity of being treated like a criminal in a pet store. They don't erase the message that even a judicial robe isn't enough protection against bias. The real question is, what changes now? Do departments finally remove officers after 5 complaints instead of 9? Do they finally connect the dots at complaint 3, complaint 4, before someone with power and resources becomes the next victim? Do we finally acknowledge that suspicious person calls from affluent neighborhoods are often code for black person present? Do we finally build systems that catch patterns before they cost cities millions and destroy lives? Because if we don't fix the culture that kept Briggs on patrol for 6 years despite 9 complaints, if we don't address the training that taught him to see black customers as threats, then we're just waiting for the next Officer Briggs, the next 911 caller who sees a black man shopping and assumes the worst, the next victim who might not have a judicial ID to offer. Comment if you believe this should be law. Officers with 3 sustained complaints involving racial profiling face mandatory termination review, not just retraining. And businesses or individuals who make false 911 calls based on race face civil penalties and mandatory bias education. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability starts with awareness and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the judges and the fathers and the teenagers and the joggers and everyone else who deserves to exist in public spaces without being criminalized. This isn't just about one officer or one judge or one pet store. It's about all of us and the systems we're willing to tolerate. Judge Marcus Whitfield could fight back. He had the credentials, the resources, the platform, but he was fighting for everyone who doesn't. The question is whether we're listening.